All right, welcome into the Five Guys on the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn the notifications on. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at Five Reasons Sports. I got Alex Donno. You can follow him at Alex Donno. We do want to mention one of our great sponsors here. As we start, it's Better Edge. You can use the code 5RSN, get $20 to play. This is our legal gambling partner, legal in the state of Florida and 43 other states. This is where, again, you can find the line that you want. That's what makes this different from the other app that I know a lot of you are using, where you got to take the line that they give you. Here, there are actually markets. So if you don't like the Heat minus 11, you might be able to find them minus 14 at a different price. I hate the fact that we're talking about, plus 11 or plus 14. I don't think we're going to see minus 11 or minus 14. And I hate the fact that we have to talk in these terms. But that's where we are right now with the Heat and the Celtics. But you can check any of it out. Also, you can play the Panthers if you would like as well. That's on here too. So check it out. Better Edge, that's with an O, betteredge.com. Just download it and use the code 5RSN and you will get $20 to play. All right, Alex, we got a mixed episode today because we've got two teams in the playoffs. Thursday, we're going to talk Dolphins because the Dolphins have their first round pick. On Thursday, we've got a ton of Dolphins programming. So we will get the Heat and the Panthers out of the way here today, even though I think one of those teams is not going to be gotten out of the way of for a while, and the other one may be gotten the way out of the way of in about a week. The Heat are down 1-0 in their series. The Panthers are up 1-0 in their series. Of course, the Panthers are home. The Heat are on the road. They actually get to play separately here with the Panthers playing tonight. The Heat play tomorrow.
That's rare.
And they're both rare. Well, they're both on Saturday, which, it's just like, I don't understand why they can't separate these things a little bit better. But we had this conversation last year when it seemed like they were playing pretty much every night until the conference finals. And then they got separate nights, which got a little bit better. But we're going to talk some Heat stuff first, and we're going to bring on Alex Baumgartner, who covers the Panthers for us, and he was at Game 1, and he'll be covering this series home and road for us at Five Reasons Sports, and he'll break everything down for us. But I do want to start with the Heat, and I want to start with a couple of different things. One is I did a video on this. We just had Coach Tony Fiorentino on the podcast on 5 on the Floor, and that's going to post here soon. There have been a couple of topics that have come up with the Heat this week that really don't have a whole lot to do with the actual basketball. One is the criticism of Heat fans for not being in their seats at 7 o'clock. Michael Wilbon, who I'm sure has not been to Miami in quite a while. I can't remember seeing Wilbon since the Big Three down here, actually. And then Kendrick Perkins, who was in Miami, and he was a big reason that the Heat beat the Thunder in the finals back in 2012 because the Heat played him off the floor. They both criticized Heat fans for not being in their seats at 7 o'clock. And then we got this additional thing. First, Perkins coming out and saying that if the Heat made all of their shots, they'd still get swept, which just shows that he can't do math. And then there was the last thing, maybe a different word with an MTH, but not an A in there. And then the other thing that came up here, Alex, was Brian Scalibrine, Red Mamba, as they call him, going on Sirius XM NBA with Frank Isola, who I've known very well for a very long time, and then doubling down on this take that Erik Spoelstra ordered a code red on Jayson Tatum. Before we move forward with Heat and Panthers talk and kind of where these two franchises are right now, because I think it's relevant. I think they're at different points in their trajectory. What were your thoughts on some of these controversies over the past couple of days?
The Scalibrine thing, quite frankly, was disgusting. It was such a reach for a hot take. And listen, sometimes you bring up a hot take that doesn't hurt anybody, right? You bring up a stupid sports take about, who the best all-time quarterback is or best time all-time NBA player. Like sometimes a ridiculous hot take. There are no consequences from that, just your own stupidity. But in this case with Scalibrine, and you pointed it out so well on your show yesterday, Ethan, is that it's slanderous towards Erik Spoelstra. I mean, the idea that Erik Spoelstra would go into a timeout basically saying, I need you to hurt this guy, when that's clearly not what happened. Martin was pushed into Tatum. Like, it's not like he could have even controlled that. Like, for Scalibrine to and not only to say it, but to double down on it. I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes you say something stupid, you realize it, and you either apologize or you pivot away from it. He didn't do either of those things. He doubled down on it. It is downright slanderous to Erik Spoelstra, and it's slanderous to the Miami Heat organization. It's slanderous to Caleb Martin. So I just thought that was absolutely disgusting. Now, I got to tell you, man, it's and I know that there are a number of different media narratives against Miami. I mean, the whole crowd thing filling up the arena stuff, that'll never go away. That's always going to be a narrative, whether it's for real or not. But as far as this Code Red thing goes, I got to give a credit because it's not Scalabrine, I think, is a man on an island here. And I was seeking out a lot of stuff on YouTube this morning because I wanted to see what everybody is saying about it. Like how many people agree with Scalabrine? Is anybody else talking about the Code Red? And I was actually watching a local post-game segment from Boston after game one. And I've got to give Cornbread Maxwell a ton of credit because you could tell that whoever, the talking head that he was on TV with was clearly trying to bait Cornbread. Like, oh, what did you think about that controversial moment? He didn't take the bait. He said, you know what? I love it. Martin didn't do it on purpose. There was no intent there. So Cornbread Maxwell got it. So I appreciated that. And hopefully this is not a narrative that anybody besides Scalabrine, who was an afterthought in the NBA, by the way. I mean, I barely remember who that guy was. Okay. Hopefully no one else is running with that narrative. As far as the narrative about the empty arena thing, I not to make it sound like I'm making excuses for my city as a proud Miamian, but it's a nightmare to get to that arena.
It is. It is.
When if I'm whether I'm covering a game or I'm just going to a game as a fan, even though I live farther away from Amarant Bank Arena, I live closer to the Kaseya Center, but it's just so nice to be able to drive into a Panthers game. It's so easy to get to, so easy.
You're in and out.
Going to Kaseya Center, it's you're 2 hours. It's like I live I don't know, about 15 miles away from that building. I live like 40 miles away from the Panthers arena, but it's so much easier to get to that one. And so there might be some big cities out there. Now, a lot of the big cities have public transportation, which Miami basically doesn't have. But there might be some big cities out there where if you're going to go to a 7:00 game, you're perfectly fine leaving at 4:30, 5 o'clock to get there. Number one, for the employed people out there, that can be a difficult proposition. And number two, leaving 2.5 hours early to get anywhere. That's not in the Miami DNA. Okay. So
no, it's not. And I live in Fort Lauderdale, and yes, sunrise is incredibly easy. I mean, my daughter and I sometimes make a decision. We're going to go to a Panther game, and we'll buy tickets 45 minutes before, and we're in our seats. We get ready, we go, we're in our seats by game time.
Yeah, and Ethan, I'll give you an example. Like I took my son. Actually, we went to the Panthers Lightning game one on Sunday, and trying to get an ADHD 6-year-old to go anywhere. It's difficult. So we arrived at the arena 10, 15 minutes after the game started. But we left super late. We got there super quick. We did have to park in the back corner of the parking lot because the game was sold out. But it was if we had left we left probably 30 minutes before the game started. Had we tried to do that for a Heat playoff game, we would have gotten there in the fourth quarter.
Three days before. I mean, I live in Lauderdale. If I don't leave by 4, I'm screwed. I mean, and that's for a 7:30 start. You basically are going to spend an hour and 15 to an hour and 30 minutes in the car. Then you're trying to get off 395 if that's the route that you choose. They have changed the traffic pattern there, I think 33 times. They've changed the traffic pattern on 395 more times than the Heat have changed starting lineups. It literally, you cannot. And then they designed it in such a way that people think you're trying to cut in on them when really there's just no other way to go. There's only one exit. So you've got to go across the entire thing. The problem with the Heat situation, it's a city planner problem. It's a highway problem. It's an FHP problem. It's a city cops problem. It's a problem of the arena, the arena process. And I'll call them out on this. I've been to every arena in the country. It takes you longer to get into that arena from outside when you're waiting outside to go through security than any arena I've ever been to. And I'm not saying for me, because I go through the media area, that's easy. But I'm saying when I've taken somebody to a game and I have to go through the main area, I'm like, okay, no, not again. I mean, it's awful. Okay, it's much worse than the process at the stadium. They need to clean that up. The concessions are slow as hell. Okay, that's another issue. So you have all of this stuff going on, and then you're blaming Heat fans for not being in their seats at 7 o'clock. But it's a bigger issue here, though. Okay, the issue is that people outside of Miami don't know how to talk about this team and this organization. So they go to these like low-hanging fruit topics. Like there is no way that Kendrick Perkins or Michael Wilbon watched Nikola Jovic or Jaime Jaquez play a minute of basketball this year, particularly Jovic. They don't know anything about this. I'm not saying that the Heat earned their eyes this year, because in a lot of ways they didn't. That's another issue. But particularly outside of South Florida, the national media is dominated, okay, by Boston and New York and LA, and that's it. They don't, and I want desperately for Denver, OKC, and San Antonio to dominate the league for the next 5 years. So ESPN has to figure out a way to how to talk about LeBron James at age 45, because that's kind of where we're at. Like, they don't know how to talk ball, and now we see that like JJ Redick is likely leaving ESPN for Charlotte. I think he gets that job. He's like the one person who, like him or not, was trying to bring like some actual basketball conversation into that place. There's not going to be any. So we start talking about the fans. I knew, Alex, as soon as they announced it as a 7:00 game, which the Heat had no control over, there was going to be nobody in the seats when it started. Yeah. You can't. There's a reason
it's bad, but it's really like for me, and you know, I don't go to nearly as many Heat games as I watch on TV, so I judge it based on how many people are in their seats at the end of the game, not how many people are in their seats when the game starts. Because that's when you measure, okay, yeah, it was a sellout. They were just stuck in traffic for 3 hours, right?
Right. And the other thing is, look, they put a lot of distractions and diversions inside that arena. So people end up in the lounges. They end up on the patio. Yeah. They know their audience. Okay. I'm not going to say that everybody who goes to the games is sitting there and knows what a pick and roll is even. Okay. I'm not saying that. There are different gradations of Heat fans. All right. The people who are watching this, the people who are, most of them probably aren't going to a lot of games. The people who are going to the games are not necessarily watching this. Okay. That's kind of how it works out. But to make that the topic, and then the Scalabrine thing, and I've said enough on this on a video yesterday and on the podcast, it's really gross. I mean, you mentioned that others, even Bill Simmons, okay, like super Celtics fan, who is brazen about it, said that Caleb Martin didn't do anything wrong. And I communicated with Frank Isola yesterday, who is on the air. He sent me a message. He saw my video on Twitter. He sent me a message. He said, "Good video." And we were communicating afterwards. He says, I tried to tell Brian on the air that like it wasn't done intentionally, but he wouldn't listen to me. So it's just, look, I think we're at a point now, honestly, where a lot of Heat fans, and we'll get into this with Alex a little bit. A lot of Heat fans are they're frustrated by the season. A lot of them just wanted this to be over, just end the pain at this stage with everything that's happened. But all the Heat are trying to do is just play as hard as they can at this stage. So just make the best of it. They're not trying to hurt anybody. Okay. They're not trying to take out Jayson Tatum. And I said it yesterday on a video. If they took out Jayson Tatum, they'd still be underdogs in this series, like significantly. So it's not like that's going to get you to the next round. I mean, Tatum was the only guy on the team who didn't make 2 threes in the last game. And that's actual literal. Not the only guy on the team did not make 2 threes. And all the other 7 guys made at least 40% of their threes while making at least 2. I mean, that Miami's not winning this series regardless. So it ended up being a whole bunch of other stuff. Before we get to Alex here, I do want to get into this because real quick, it does feel to me like the Heat and Panthers have diverged here a little bit. Whereas last year, it was like they were copying each other, like 8th seeds, both beat Boston, right? Huge underdogs, both had kind of underachieving seasons because the Panthers were President's Trophy the year before, and the Heat were number 1 seed. Then it does feel to me, though, that they've gone different directions here, that Zito has created something that we kind of know is going to be really good here for a while. And with the Heat, it feels like they need like change, like significant change. So we'll get into that a little bit as we go forward. Before we do, we got a great sponsor, the 5 Reasons Sports Network. You can get Panthers and Heat stuff here.
Hey, it's Ethan Skolnick for the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We've got a great new sponsor that fits with us perfectly. It's called jerseys305.com. That's jerseys305.com. This is your home for dead stock and vintage jerseys from the Heat, Panthers, Dolphins, Marlins, and the other local teams. Their mission was born from a passion for wearing jerseys of the old styles and the past players. Jerseys 305 aims to make every fan stand out from the crowd with unique pieces that you don't commonly see anymore. Maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, but not today. And Jerseys 305 was created by the fans, for the fans. They're diehards just like you. In fact, they're probably listening to this episode right now. So check them out. Jerseys 305, their partnership with 5 Reasons Sports, celebrating with a 10% discount on the next purchase using the code 5 at checkout. Unlock your exclusive savings on the entire vintage collection.
All right, so we're talking here about the Heat. They're down 0-1. Panthers are up 1-0 in the Battle of Florida. 3-2 win in Game 1. Donno was there. Alex Baumgartner is going to be at Game 2 tonight. He'll also be in Tampa later in the week. He's actually been invading my neighborhood lately. Iceplex is nice, man. For anybody who, well, I don't want to give them free advertising, but we should get them as a sponsor. But and if you haven't been in Fort Lauderdale, my daughter and I are there all the time now, and they've got the ice and they got the Panthers in the front. You can't watch them right now, though, Alex. Right? Like that's the change. Like during the regular season, you can go watch the Panthers practice. Right now, they went up there. They got the black tarp up there.
Yeah, they opened it up to the public maybe a month ago, and second the playoffs started, they're like, all right, we're going to close it up. Some playoff teams will keep it open to the fans. Florida doesn't. Guess a sort of a preference on what the coaches want. So next season you'll be able to watch their practices unless something changes.
Yeah, so we'll see how that plays out. And again, they've got a big game tonight. This Tampa rivalry, it has been. I mean, this has been one of this is almost like a Heat Celtics rivalry for those who are unfamiliar with it. Kind of some of the chippiness and all that stuff that's gone on. Fair to say here, Alex, that Barkov was the best player in Game 1.
Yeah, no question. Defensively, offensively, he had the most points too. Physically, he had the most hits. It was a Alexander Barkov show. And we said all season, Barkov looks a little more aggressive, not dirty, but a little nastier. And I mean, Paul Maurice jokingly called him a goon a couple weeks ago. So you need performances like that from your captain. And Barkov, I think that Stanley Cup final appearance last year really got to the guys because they came out with a mission this season, and a lot of it relied on Barkov being way more physical.
And the Panthers, they didn't give up much defensively, Alex, in that first game. You know, it was a long time before Tampa registered a shot on goal. Tampa actually did pretty well with the limited opportunities they were able to create. Thought Florida was really good on the forecheck. So what's the Lightning adjustment going to look like? Because obviously these teams are going to be going tit for tat for the next several games, hopefully only 3 more for the Panthers fans watching. But what do you think is the adjustment Tampa has to make to try to get control of the next game in the series?
Well, Tampa was able to kind of weather the storm in Game 1. Florida had all the shots the first 15 minutes of the game. They went up 1-0. But as we've talked about for years now, playoff Andrei Vasilevsky is a brick wall, not just against the Panthers, but pretty much everyone. Florida should have been up like 3-0 before Tampa got their first shot on goal. And if it's a 1-goal game, the Lightning got 3 shots and they scored on it. But Florida has better foot speed. They're a little more aggressive on the forecheck. Tampa did have more hits in the game, but the quality hits and the quality forecheck was all coming from the Panthers' way. And the Panthers only gave up 19 shots that whole game. And in a playoff game, that's kind of insane. So Tampa's going to have to try and get more pucks towards Sergei Bobrovsky and more screens because they're not beating the Panthers in a foot race.
So Barkov has been the one constant, obviously, forever. You mentioned him being a goon, or being perceived as a goon, which is kind of funny, with all the questions about him in the playoffs in the past. But it does seem like with the Panthers over the past 3 years, there's been like a different other guy who's been kind of the lead. And I mean, I go back to 3 years ago where Verhaeghe had a ton of big goals during that stretch. He's still there. Last year it was obviously Tkachuk. I mean, it was just, when you needed a play, a goal, something, a hit, it was him. And this year from the very start, it's been Reinhart. It's rare that you have a franchise that keeps them all together, obviously. And I know Reinhart, that's going to be an issue as we go forward here. But who would you say, if you needed a goal right now on this team, and obviously you made a big Tarasenko, you make a big trade to bring in somebody who's scored a lot of goals in the past. You need a big goal in a game this year. Like last time I said, it was Tkachuk. It was Verhaeghe the year before. Feels like it's been Reinhart this year. Who would you say it is right now?
It's whoever Barkov gets the puck to right now, because that's just how it's been. Game 1, both of the goals Alexander Barkov made the play to set up the goal, not including the empty netter. If we're just going one player, I would say Sam Reinhart. As you mentioned, Carter Verhaeghe 3 seasons ago, Matthew Tkachuk last season, Sam Reinhart this season. But an important thing to realize is even though there's a new guy that kind of shines as a secondary player for the offense, the other guys still perform. Tkachuk and Verhaeghe also both scored in game one.
Mhm.
So your consistent playoff performers showed up in the first game, and Sam Reinhart, second most goals in the NHL this year, opened the scoring in game one. The big boys for the Panthers all showed up in game one.
You know, and you talked about playoff Vasilevsky. Bob was excellent in net for the Panthers, even though Tampa didn't have as many shots on goal as Florida did. Bob made some huge saves, specifically near the end of that hockey game to preserve the win. Can we expect that consistently from Bob again in this postseason run? Where do you think things are at with him?
Well, they're going to need it. Bob probably had his best regular season this year since he was a Vezina winner in Columbus. That's how good he was. And then their backup, Anthony Stolarz, was actually number 1 in save percentage, and I think number 1 in goals against average. So the Panthers have done a really good job at getting a tandem the last couple of years going, but they're not pulling Bob unless he's injured. He's just been too on point with his game, and it's not like the Bruins where they went Swayman game 1, Allmark game 2, and they want to keep that tandem rolling because Florida kind of exposed them last year. Florida's just going to keep going with Bob until something happens.
It's really kind of amazing story with Bob. I mean, if you look at it like late last regular season, I remember being in the crowd and people were yelling at him and complaining about the contract, and now anybody would sign that contract with the way he's played of late. Want to ask you something about Maurice, because obviously we don't talk about him here quite as much as we do about Spo or about McDaniel or any of the others. But talk about somebody else who, like, a lot of fans were not happy with at first, and trying to get him to transition to a different style. But now I feel like if I was to say to you, like, Panther fan satisfaction with Paul Maurice, a scale of 1 to 100, what would you say?
Like 98. There's always that one guy when they're on their little 3-game skid when they're still first place in the Atlantic that might say fire Maurice. I still get those tweets sent to me every once in a blue moon. But man, they love that guy. Between the way he transformed the team's style, the way he kind of backs his players, I don't think he's ever, at least when I was there, talked trash about one of his players. But some coaches will call him out. He won't necessarily do that. He'll say he'll openly say they play terrible, like the team. Won't single out a player, but between his style, the way his style is, the way he talks to the fans, the way he talks to the media, the way the national guys love him.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now, those Toronto Riders wanted Florida on the first round to get Paul Maurice sound bites. They wanted him at the All-Star game for those sound bites.
No, he gives good soundbite. I'll say that. It's funny because what you mentioned is actually very consistent with the other two coaches I mentioned. I've always said this about Spoelstra. He will criticize collectively but praise individually, and that's not something that all coaches. And McDaniel does the same thing actually, and that's not something that all coaches do. I saw Adam. I mean, Adam Gase certainly didn't do that. Brian Flores certainly didn't do that. Right. So there's a history down here of that not being the case. Donno, you're up.
Yeah, well, so I wanted to get your take, Alex. Before this series started, obviously the Panthers are off to the 1-0 start, which is great. When it comes to facing Tampa, I never count my chickens before they're hatched. When this series came to be, what was your prediction pre-series as to how many games and who wins, and has that changed after game 1?
Yeah, I said I was going to go the distance. I still think it goes the distance, whether that's 6 or 7. Last year, I refused to make any predictions. I think I did that on your show, too. I said no predictions. They went to the Cup final.
Yeah, I thought it was lame, so I want a prediction this year.
That's right. We need a prediction.
Well, you're not getting one this year because I want to work until June. The Panthers, on paper, are the better team, but they were also, on paper, the better team that President's Trophy year. And, I mean, Tampa took them to lunch, and they didn't pay. It was bad.
Yeah.
So this year it's different. And I wrote an article yesterday where I kind of looked into how important this Battle of Florida was for the Panthers organization. And I say that knowing Tampa won their their back-to-back cup after beating the Panthers in that Quenneville year. But if they didn't get swept by Tampa, there would be no Matthew Tkachuk here. There probably would still be Andrew Burnett, so no Paul Maurice. And the Panthers would not be playing the style of hockey they're playing today. And they probably wouldn't have been in the cup final last year. So it was an important series leading up to it. And now you got to slay the dragon. And Tampa's the dragon you got to slay before you can win the cup.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of similarities. It's the Heat stuff we were talking about earlier. And I remember that series against Tampa. They were lifeless. I mean, especially their core guys were just, I mean, there was no energy whatsoever, no physicality or anything like that. All right, make sure you follow Alex's coverage. He's got it all over the website at 5reasonsports.com. Also videos from the game and more. We appreciate you. Baumgartner 91 if you want to follow on Twitter. We want to thank our sponsors, jerseys305.com. Check it out. They got Panthers stuff on there too. Heat stuff, Panther stuff, Marlins, Inter Miami, and everything else. Of course, Better Edge. Use the code 5RSN. Donno and I will be back on Thursday. We got a lot of Dolphins coverage, like our whole team, mobilizing a live stream. We got playback. We got all that. Also, that Dolphin fans can be pissed about some guard that they take at whatever 16th overall. Have a good one, everybody.